As more and more numbers and other metrics trickle in, it is becoming increasingly clear that Zack Snyder's Justice League was indeed a major hit for HBO Max. By this time, more will be subscribing for Godzilla vs. Kong and even Mortal Kombat, but indications are the Snyder Cut is holding up very well. Even so, WarnerMedia had preemptively stated that they have no intention of continuing the SnyderVerse, and it's been reported that they intend to use the upcoming Flash movie to end it completely, having Robert Pattinson be the only big-screen Batman from there on out. But that's WarnerMedia. AT&T and their HBO Max wing might not agree. Just like in Lucasfilm over Star Wars, there is something of a secret corporate war being fought over the future direction of DC on film, and there are two distinct factions. In this video, we will explore these two factions, who they are comprised of, and most importantly, what each faction wants for the future of DC on film. The publication Small Screen has described the factions at length, labeling them as Team SnyderVerse and Team Hamadaverse. There is very much so a Team SnyderVerse, but I find labeling the opposing side as Team Hamadaverse to be somewhat misleading. While Walter Hamada currently serves as the president of DC on film, he was only appointed to that role after the release of Joss Whedon's Justice League. He had nothing to do with anything that happened prior to that, and his direct oversight started in full force with Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 84. What is more, he merely continued a direction of diversity and separation already started by his predecessors. And there is near universal agreement about the virtue of this direction within his faction. Meaning, if Hamada were to be removed, all who would remain would continue down the same direction even without him, as he is not central to it. So for the purposes of this video, I instead choose to call this the Establishment faction, as it is comprised of Hollywood insiders who think and feel much the same way, with or without Walter Hamada. As such, I would recommend you adopt that or a similar terminology as well, the SnyderVerse faction and the Establishment faction. With the two factions established, let's explore what they're all about. Warner Pictures has always been considered an auteur-friendly studio that generally do not meddle much into the productions of the filmmakers they hire. But their one weak spot has always been DC on film. No matter how many different producers or creative teams they appointed to establish a DC counterpart to the MCU. Ever since their first attempt with Green Lantern a whopping 10 years ago, none have succeeded. The reason for that is simple. Marvel has Kevin Feige, an experienced film producer first, who has built his way to the top of the industry, while also being a comic book fan who understands the medium. WarnerMedia has plenty film producers, but not a single one of them understands comics or their audience. They also have plenty comic book professionals to turn to, but as it turned out, none of them understood how to apply their comic book knowledge on film. The Establishment faction, comprised of Walter Hamada, Ann Sarnoff, Toby Emmerich, and many of the same establishment Hollywood producers that have been failing at DC on film for a decade now, have accepted that they don't have what it takes to replicate Marvel's success in making faithful adaptations or interconnected stories. Instead of giving up completely though, they have come up with a clever new strategy. It's called pick and choose, and otherwise throw everything diverse at the wall and see what sticks. According to a March 26th scoop in Geekosity magazine by renowned insider Mikey Sutton, going forward, Warner does not want a connected cinematic universe, but it wants to cherry-pick what they feel will sell tickets from Snyder's theatrical movies. These include Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, Jason Momoa's Aquaman, Amber Heard's Mira, and Ezra Miller's Flash. The Wonder Woman and Aquaman franchises are not going to be rebooted. They will simply ignore the continuity of the Snyderverse and make no references to them. When Wonder Woman or Aquaman meet Batman, he will not be Affleck. He never existed. The Dark Knight is Robert Pattinson. Sutton also clarifies that their plan of making it so that Batfleck never existed is by having the Flash movie, in which Ben Affleck is confirmed to appear, adapt Flashpoint with a sprinkle of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Sutton was told that Ben Affleck's Batman is poised to be the Supergirl or Flash martyr figure in the movie, who goes out in a blaze of glory but is erased and forgotten after that. Despite some recent murmurs to the contrary, Warner is still confident that Michael Keaton will be in The Flash. However, if he sticks around, he'll return as only Bruce Wayne post-Flash. His Batman will be retired and the baton passed only to Robert Pattinson, the only big-screen Batman going forward. On that note, you will recall from our earlier coverage that Robert Pattinson was the studio choice, i.e. the establishment faction's choice to be Batman. Director Matt Reeves reportedly wanted Nicholas Hoult, which is part of the reason why the two had a terribly strained working relationship, to say the least. The Geekosity magazine article continues. DC Films' path going forward is to disconnect. They want to throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. The thought process seems to be, if you don't like Hourman, you might enjoy J.J. Abrams' Superman reboot or Blue Beetle. Nevertheless, you don't have to watch all of them. By doing it this way, Warner executives won't need any prior knowledge of the comic books. They will simply look at each project individually and make a decision regarding their commercial potential simply based on that. Sources said that their desire is to offer diverse product that's not always quite true to their comic book roots. The comics will simply provide ideas that they can turn into something different, tweak it to reflect the times. So there you have it. If these reports are to be believed, and if you've seen our earlier coverage, you'll know Mikey Sutton does have a solid track record here. The establishment faction sees Snyder's picks for Wonder Woman and Aquaman as working. They have faith in their own pick of Robert Pattinson as Batman, and beyond that, the source material is just a starting point, not to be taken too seriously. Diverse and reflective of the times are the orders of the day. Harkening back to the previously covered Variety hit piece, this is what Sarnoff feels that you should be so excited about that you'll forget all about the continuation of the SnyderVerse. However, there are two opposing forces standing in the way of the establishment faction. One of them is the SnyderVerse faction. The SnyderVerse faction is comprised of the management of AT&T, a telecommunications company that is new to the film industry. They don't care so much about the theatrical side of things. They're all about HBO Max, as they believe the future is on streaming. They were the ones that made the call to facilitate the Snyder Cut for HBO Max in the first place, despite the objections from WarnerMedia. And they were the ones who made the call to dump WarnerMedia's entire 2021 theatrical slate straight to HBO Max, despite WarnerMedia and the rest of Hollywood at large having a fit about it. From AT&T's point of view, a theatrical release is little more than part of a movie's promotional campaign for streaming, which is where it's at from their point of view. Where DC is concerned, they don't have any strong convictions one way or the other. Their interest is in growing the HBO Max subscription base. As such, they are not in principle opposed to what the establishment faction wants to do. If their strategy of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks should happen to provide some more winners for HBO Max, then let them. However, there is a proven audience demand for the SnyderVerse, so they're not prepared to let that go. On the contrary, they will continue to monitor how the Snyder Cut works out for them, and if they deem it sufficiently successful, they could very well commission the SnyderVerse to continue on HBO Max, regardless of what WarnerMedia feels about it. Case in point, Warner were adamant we would never get the Snyder Cut in the first place. Even Forbes were adamant on their behalf that there was no way, no how. But not even a year and a half after that article, courtesy of AT&T, The Snyder Cut is tearing it up on HBO Max. According to Smallscreen, HBO Max is competing with Netflix in offering Zack Snyder an exclusivity deal, and that is no coincidence. I reached out to Mikey Sutton and was told that AT&T are taking a hands-off approach of what WarnerMedia is doing, as they do not want to rock the boat. However, AT&T are of the mindset that WarnerMedia better deliver on what they're doing. For example, it was opined to me that Hamada and his team have put a lot of weight and prestige behind Robert Pattinson as Batman. If that doesn't work out, changes in who runs DC on film will be forthcoming. In other words, the establishment faction don't have completely free reins. Also, as I hinted at earlier, there is one more party to consider.
The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Another power player behind the scenes is The Rock himself, Dwayne Johnson. In his corner is his agent and ex-wife Dani Garcia, and The Rock's friend and Dani Garcia's other client, Henry Cavill. Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam will be a big deal in theatrical DC films going forward. And remember, theatrical films is the purview of the establishment faction. However, The Rock wants to square off against Superman, and not any Superman, but Henry Cavill's Superman. It has also been opined to me that the backstory of this Superman will be the one seen in the Snyder Cut. This then would make Team Rock more closely aligned with the SnyderVerse faction. But the establishment faction are still desperate to work with them, as The Rock has a habit of making theatrical movies turn into box office hits. For all the diversity of the establishment faction's plans, The Rock may be the closest thing they have to a certain hit. Because here's the rub. The SnyderVerse faction know that there is an established community and fan base supporting the SnyderVerse. An audience has already been built. It exists, it wants to be catered to, and it wants to pay for the privilege. By contrast, for all the lofty words and high-flung intentions expressed by Ann Sarnoff to Variety, the establishment faction can only hope that a community and audience supportive of what they're doing will spring into existence, because as of right now, there isn't really one. That is why they need The Rock. He brings an audience they hope they can convince to stay and check out everything else. As for the continued developments with the competing factions over the future of DC, AT&T and WarnerMedia, we will keep you up to date here at Midnight's Edge. It's about to get interesting, because AT&T have started pushing back by putting some real numbers out there, and David Ayer isn't accepting WarnerMedia's declining to do his cut of Suicide Squad. We'll get on that very soon. Till then, let us know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.